could you? After everything, you think you can just walk away from this? I'll see you destroyed.
Mom's already taken the $50,000 deposit, and since she co-signed for this apartment, she owns it and she's selling it. Madeline screamed those words as she hurled a crumpled loan contract onto my bed in the middle of the night, not caring whether I was awake or asleep. She only cared about Cassie, my younger sister, who was retching on the pavement outside and needed a getaway car for whatever trouble she'd just caused. "Don't be selfish. Give me the keys." She spat the words in my face with manufactured authority, as if borrowing my car to help her golden child flee a crime scene was my duty as the family workhorse. I looked at that illegal contract, then at the woman who just sold her daughter's only sanctuary to a loan shark without flinching. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I simply reached for my heavy winter coat hanging by the door. I knew the spare key to her brand new $98,000 luxury SUV was zipped inside the lining from when I'd serviced it last week. I threw the coat at her and told her to take the car, take the coat, and just go. She grabbed the bundle and ran, thinking she'd stolen the keys to my old sedan, oblivious to the fact that she'd just hijacked her own prized possession. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of ringing in your ears after a gunshot. I stood in the center of my living room, staring at the empty doorway where my mother had just stood, the air still thick with her cloying floral perfume that she wore like armor. I didn't go to the window to watch them leave because I knew exactly what was happening down there. Cassie was stumbling into the driver's seat of a 400-horsepower vehicle, intoxicated and entitled, believing she just pulled off another heist. Madeline was likely buckling her in, cooing that everything would be fine because they'd won again. They always thought they won. That was the dynamic written in stone since the day I was born. I was born in 1992, the same year my father left and the economy crashed, causing my mother to lose her vice president position just 3 weeks after her maternity leave ended. She looked at me, a colicky infant in a second-hand crib, and decided I was the bad omen, the anchor dragging her life down into the abyss. But Cassie was different. She was born 3 years later on the exact day Madeline won a $70,000 settlement from a minor car accident. Suddenly, money flowed, debts were paid, and the sun shone on her life again. Cassie wasn't just a baby, she was a good luck charm, a golden ticket. The rules of growing up in that house were simple. I was the worker, Cassie was the prize. I was the mule, she was the show pony. I remember clearly the day I turned 18, when my grandmother, the only person who ever looked at me with softness, left me a small velvet box in her will. Inside was a vintage emerald necklace, delicate and real, the first thing of value I'd ever owned. I hid it in my sock drawer, terrified to wear it, but 2 weeks later I came home to find the box empty. I found the necklace draped around Cassie's neck as she preened in front of the mirror, getting ready for a party I wasn't even invited to. When I confronted Madeline, she didn't even look up from her magazine. "Your sister needs a car for college, so we sold the necklace for the down payment. Take the bus. You're the worker. She's the face of the family who needs to shine." I learned 2 things that day. Anything I loved would be cannibalized to feed Cassie's vanity, and in Madeline's mind, I had no property rights. She believed that because she'd birthed me, fed me, and signed a permission slip or loan document once upon a time, she retained feudal ownership over my entire existence. She looked at this apartment, my sanctuary, and saw no property deed. She didn't see the 5 years of mortgage payments I'd scraped together by skipping meals and working 60-hour weeks. She only saw a co-signature she'd scribbled on a piece of paper 10 years ago. In her twisted logic, that signature made her the lord of the manor and me the serf. She truly believed she had the right to sell the roof over my head at 3 in the morning to pay off a gambling debt. She believed I would just accept it, just as I'd accepted the loss of the emeralds. But she forgot that the worker sees everything. The worker learns how the machinery operates and knows exactly which lever to pull to bring the whole factory down. I walked to the window where the taillights of the luxury SUV flared bright red before peeling away into the darkness. I checked the time on my phone, 3:22 a.m., and I didn't call the police or warn them that Cassie was too drunk to drive a 400-horsepower beast. I simply watched the red lights fade and waited for the sound that would come to reestablish the order of the world. For 29 years, I'd been the safety net that allowed them to be reckless, but tonight I'd finally folded it. I stood by the window of my dark apartment, my breath fogging the glass as I watched the taillights of the luxury SUV disappear into the biting Chicago sleet. It was exactly 3:22 in the morning. In the silence that followed Madeline's departure, the air in the room felt heavy, still clinging to the scent of her expensive, cloying perfume, a smell that had always signaled an impending storm in my life. I walked to the kitchen and brewed a cup of black coffee, the ritual grounding me. My hands didn't shake. Instead, they felt cold and steady, the hands of someone who'd spent a decade building a life out of scraps while her family tried to burn the blueprint. I pulled up my laptop and opened the tracking app for the SUV. Madeline was too technologically illiterate to realize that when I'd offered to set up the vehicle's security suite last month, I'd linked every sensor and the high-definition dashcam to my personal cloud account. On the screen, a small red dot moved erratically through the grid of the city. The telemetry data showed the vehicle was swerving. Cassie was behind the wheel, likely still intoxicated from whatever incident had sent Madeline running to my door at 3 in the morning. I could have called the police right then. I could have reported the car stolen. I could have warned them that a 400-horsepower beast was being piloted by a girl who couldn't even walk straight. But then I remembered Napoleon's old adage, never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. For 29 years, I'd been the fixer. When Cassie crashed her first car, I was the one who spent my weekends working overtime to pay the deductible. When Madeline overextended her credit cards, I was the one who reorganized her debt. I'd been the safety net that allowed them to be reckless. But tonight, I'd folded that net. I watched the red dot accelerate on a stretch of the expressway. The dashcam feed began to buffer, then it snapped into focus. I could hear the muffled sounds of their conversation through the internal cabin mic. "She's such a loser, Mom." Cassie's voice was slurred, punctuated by a sharp, jagged laugh. "She actually gave you the keys. I told you she was weak." "She knows her place, Cassie," Madeline replied, her voice tight with a mixture of stress and triumph. "She's a worker. She exists to make our lives easier. Now focus on the road. We need to get this car to the warehouse before Vance's men start asking questions about the deposit." A surge of cold adrenaline hit my chest. They weren't just fleeing a scene. They were deep in a hole with a man who didn't take no for an answer. By taking my house, or what they thought was my house, they were trying to buy Cassie's way out of a debt she'd likely accrued through sheer vanity and recklessness. I looked down at the crumpled loan contract Madeline had thrown at me. 5 minutes ago, she'd stood there, fueled by frantic, jagged energy, claiming she'd sold my sanctuary to a loan shark named Vance. She believed that because she'd co-signed the original lease 10 years before, she held the deed to my soul. She didn't know about the quiet legal maneuvers I'd made 6 months prior. She didn't know that during the last refinancing, I'd presented her with a stack of papers to sign while she was distracted by a glass of Chardonnay and her latest social media feed. Among those papers was a quitclaim deed, effectively removing her name from the title she thought she still owned. My mother's greatest weakness was her arrogance. She assumed I was too simple and too much of a worker to understand the fine print. She viewed me as a utility, like a water heater or a furnace, something that should function in the background without complaint. To her, I was the girl born in the year of the crash, the bad luck charm that ended her career. To her, Cassie was the prize, the lucky break that happened on the day of a $70,000 settlement. At 3:41 in the morning, the red dot on my screen stopped moving. The G-force sensor on the app spiked into the red zone, followed by an eerie digital silence. A notification popped up. Impact detected. Emergency services notified. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I sat there in the dark, the steam from my coffee rising in a thin, ghostly line. I thought about the emerald necklace Madeline had sold behind my back. I thought about the thousands of hours I'd worked while they slept. I thought about the bad luck girl who'd finally run out of patience. The worker had finally stopped the clock. I closed the laptop, walked back to my bed, and lay down on top of the covers. I didn't sleep, but for the first time in my life, I felt the profound weight of my own power. I was no longer the mule carrying their burdens. I was the architect of the wreckage they were about to wake up to. I would wait for the sun to rise, and then I would go to the insurance office to hand them the rope Madeline just tied around her own neck. The sun rose at 6:14, casting a gray and unforgiving light that exposed every crack in the pavement and every lie told in the dark. My phone buzzed with a notification from a police scanner app. A luxury vehicle had been found abandoned in a drainage ditch 3 miles east. The driver had fled the scene, a hit and run. I poured a cup of black coffee and sat at my desk. It was time to go to work. My mother, Madeline, liked to believe she was a master manipulator, but she was lazy and believed details were beneath her. When she bought that $98,000 SUV, she had not bothered to set up the cloud account, telling me to fix it because she did not have time for tech support. So I did. I set up the account, linked it to my email, and created the password. Since she never asked for it, I never gave it to her. I logged into the dashboard, and with one click, the truth flashed on the screen. I downloaded the interior dashcam footage from the previous night. The video was high-definition evidence of a felony. On screen, Cassie was slumped in the driver's seat, clutching a bottle of vodka she had stolen from Madeline's liquor cabinet. The timestamp matched perfectly, 3:22 in the morning. "Look at me," Cassie slurred to the empty passenger seat, "driving Mom's tank. Aurora is probably crying in her ugly little sedan right now." She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Right before the car swerved, the camera shook violently as the car clipped the guardrail and slammed into a concrete embankment. I saved the file to 3 different hard drives and a cloud server, naming the folder The Boomerang. Madeline thought she was protecting her golden child and could simply report the car stolen later for the insurance money. She had no idea I had a recording of her favorite daughter committing a DUI and a hit and run in her vehicle. But that was just the appetizer. I went to the safe bolted to my closet floor, spun the dial, and pulled out a single blue folder. I laid it next to the crumpled loan agreement Madeline had thrown at me. The contrast was poetic. Madeline's document was an illegal, handwritten mess. Mine was a certified quitclaim deed, notarized and filed 6 months ago. Back then, I told Madeline I needed to refinance to lower the payments. She did not read the fine print. She did not notice the new terms required the cosigner to be removed from the title. She just signed where I pointed, arrogant enough to believe her original signature gave her eternal ownership, regardless of what the new deed said. She was wrong. Madeline had zero legal claim to this property. She was not an owner or a landlord. She was a stranger who had just accepted $50,000 for a house she did not own. I ran my hand over the raised seal on the deed. It felt like armor. They had spent 20 years treating me like a servant, thinking I was weak because I stayed silent. They forgot that the person who pays the bills keeps the receipts. The phone rang. It was Madeline. "Come to the insurance adjuster's office downtown now, because if you do not, I will tell that man you ran away with his $50,000. He breaks legs for a living, Aurora. Be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and checked my reflection. I looked tired, but sharp. I put on my blazer. I was not walking into a trap. I was springing one. I drove downtown with the windows down, letting the cold Chicago air sharpen my focus. My mother had chosen the location carefully, an insurance adjuster's office in a glass and steel tower in the financial district. It was a place designed to make you feel small, a neutral ground where she intended to perform her greatest act, the grieving mother cleaning up her daughter's mess. I parked my sedan 3 blocks away and checked my reflection. I was not wearing the stained hoodie of a victim. I wore my charcoal blazer and stilettos that clicked like gunshots on the pavement. I looked like a woman here to close a deal, not confess to a crime. Madeline was waiting in the lobby, looking flawless in her navy suit, but her hands were clenching at her sides. When she saw me, she scanned my professional outfit with disappointment. She wanted a broken scapegoat, not an executive. She yanked me into a corner and hissed the script. I had borrowed the keys for milk, mistook the car in the dark, hit a guardrail, and fled. Why would I confess to a felony? I asked. That's insurance fraud. Her smile was all teeth as she whispered a threat about Mr. Vance, the investor who had wired her $50,000. He breaks legs for a living, Aurora. Sign and save yourself. She thought she had cornered me, but I simply agreed to go upstairs. In the elevator, she fixed her lipstick, radiating the confidence of someone about to win. I hugged my iPad to my chest, knowing it held the dashcam footage and the deed. We entered room 4B, a glass box with stale, heavy air. Mr. Henderson, the senior claims adjuster, sat at the head of the table, while Mr. Vance watched from the corner like a predator. Cassie lurked in oversized sunglasses, hungover and small. Mr. Henderson slid a page across the mahogany. Because Cassie was an excluded driver, the claim would only work if a covered family member had taken the car without consent. He looked at me, but it was Madeline who picked up the pen, performing martyrdom. It breaks my heart. Aurora took the keys. I didn't know until it was too late. She stared me down, a silent command to sign or let the shark get me. I stayed silent long enough for her to fully commit. She signed her name, dated the affidavit, and pushed it back, snapping the trap shut on herself. She had just committed felony insurance fraud and perjury for a $98,000 payout. When Henderson asked for my confirmation, I set my iPad in the center of the table. My mother is mistaken. I did not take the car, and neither did she. I pressed play. Cassie's drunken voice blasted from the speakers, gloating about driving Mom's tank and sneering about my ugly little sedan. The room heard the bottle clink, the violent swerve, and the sickening crunch of impact. The video played in crisp, high definition, each frame a nail in Madeline's coffin. Henderson's boredom vanished, replaced by cold focus. He set down his pen with deliberate precision and leaned forward. "Mrs. Henderson," he asked slowly, "is that Cassie's voice?" Madeline went ash gray. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "That is," she stammered, "that is fake. Someone doctored that video. Aurora is trying to frame us." I did not raise my voice. I simply pointed to the timestamp displayed in the corner of the screen. The cloud timestamp says 3:22 in the morning. That is the exact time of the crash, according to the police report. The metadata is embedded in the file. The vehicle identification number matches the SUV registered to Madeline Henderson. The location data pinpoints the exact coordinates of the accident scene on Interstate 90. Henderson picked up his phone. His voice was flat and professional. "This is James Henderson, Senior Claims Adjuster for Midwest Insurance Group. I need the police liaison for a Code 3 fraud in progress. Yes, I will hold." Vance stood up. His chair scraped the floor like a threat. He was a large man with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left out in the rain too long. He did not care about the dead car or the insurance fraud. He wanted his deed. "Madeline," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a landslide, "where is my property?" Madeline spun to face me, her composure completely shattered. Her fingers stabbed toward my bag. "Give him the papers. Give him the deed to the house. Now!" I finally reached into my bag, not to surrender, but to finish the demolition. I pulled out the blue folder and laid it on the conference table in front of Vance. He opened it and began reading. His jaw tightened. "This deed," he said slowly, "has only one name on it, Aurora Henderson." "That is correct," I said. "My mother is not listed as an owner. She was removed from the title 6 months ago during a refinancing. She signed the quitclaim deed herself." I pulled out a second document, a notarized copy of the quitclaim deed with Madeline's signature clearly visible at the bottom. I slid it across to Vance. "She sold you a house she does not own. That is fraud, Mr. Vance. The same crime she just committed with the insurance company." The room went silent. Even Henderson paused his phone call to watch. Vance's face darkened to the color of a bruise. He looked at Madeline the way a wolf looks at wounded prey. "You took $50,000, he said, his voice dangerously soft, "for a property you did not have the authority to sell." Madeline tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her hands were shaking. Cassie, still hiding behind her sunglasses, started to cry. Quiet, hiccuping sobs that made her shoulders shake. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands. For the first time in 29 years, I was not fixing their mess. I was watching it consume them. Madeline finally found her voice. It came out strangled and desperate. "Aurora, please, we can fix this. We are family. You would not do this to your own mother." I met her eyes. They were the same eyes that had watched me work 60-hour weeks to pay off her debts. The same eyes that had watched her sell my grandmother's necklace without asking. The same eyes that had dismissed every sacrifice I had ever made as simply what workers do. "You sold my home to a loan shark at 3 in the morning, I said quietly. "You threw a contract in my face and told me I had no choice. You have spent my entire life treating me like a tool you could use and discard. You are right about one thing, though. We are family, and family keeps receipts." Henderson finished his call. "The police liaison is sending 2 officers. They will be here in 15 minutes to take statements regarding the insurance fraud and the hit and run." Vance stood up. His chair buttoned his jacket. His movements were controlled, but there was violence simmering just beneath the surface. "Mrs. Henderson, you and I will be having a very different conversation. My associates do not appreciate being stolen from. You have until Monday to return my $50,000 plus 20% interest. That is $60,000 total. If you do not, we will explore alternative collection methods." He walked out without looking back. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a guillotine blade falling. Madeline collapsed into her chair. Her perfect navy suit was wrinkled. Her carefully applied makeup was smudged. She looked like what she was, a woman who had gambled everything and lost. I stood up and gathered my inks, my iPad, my folder, my evidence. I walked toward the door, and Madeline's voice stopped me. "How could you do this to us?" I turned back. She was crying now, real tears, not the theatrical kind she used to manipulate people. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. "I did not do this to you. You did this to yourself. I just stopped cleaning up after you." I walked out of room 4B and took the elevator down to the lobby. The morning sun was breaking through the Chicago clouds, and for the first time in 29 years, I felt light. The weight I had carried, the invisible chains that bound me to their chaos, were gone. The worker had finally stopped working. I drove home slowly, taking the long route through Lincoln Park. The morning traffic was building, commuters streaming into the city like blood pumping through arteries. I felt separate from them, disconnected in a way that was not unpleasant. I had lived my entire life in service to other people's chaos. Now, for the first time, I belonged only to myself. My phone began ringing before I even reached my apartment. Madeline. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again, and again. By the time I parked, I had 17 missed calls. I listened to the first voicemail as I climbed the stairs to my door. "Aurora, you need to fix this. Call me back immediately. The police are asking questions about the video. They want to interview Cassie. You need to tell them you made a mistake, that you were confused. Please, Aurora, we are your family." I deleted it without listening to the rest. Inside my apartment, everything looked different. The same furniture, the same walls, but transformed by the simple fact that they were truly mine now. No cosigner, no invisible claim hanging over my head like a sword. I walked through each room, touching the door frames, the countertops, the windowsills. This was my sanctuary, and I had defended it. I made coffee and sat by the window overlooking the street. The sun was fully up now, burning off the morning fog. My phone continued to buzz with increasing desperation. Madeline, Cassie, unknown numbers that were probably Vance's associates. I silenced them all. At noon, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers. I had been expecting them. "Miss Henderson," the older officer said when I opened the door. He had kind eyes and gray hair. "I am Detective Morris, and this is Officer Ramirez. We would like to ask you some questions about the incident this morning at the insurance office." I invited them in and offered coffee, which they declined. We sat in my living room and I told them everything. I showed them the tracking app data. I showed them the complete Dashcam footage, including the audio of Madeline and Cassie discussing their plan to blame me. I showed them the quitclaim deed and explained how Madeline had attempted to sell property she did not own. Detective Morris took notes in a small leather notebook. Officer Ramirez recorded our conversation on a digital device. "Your mother and sister are claiming you fabricated the video," Detective Morris said. "They say you have a vendetta against them." I expected that. The metadata will prove the video is authentic. The cloud account is registered to the vehicle's identification number. The timestamps match the police report from the accident scene. Everything is verifiable. He nodded. "We will need copies of everything. The insurance company has already filed charges for attempted fraud. The hit and run is a separate matter. Your sister could be facing serious jail time." "I understand," I said. "I will cooperate fully." After they left, I sat in the silence of my apartment and waited for guilt to arrive. I had just destroyed my mother's life and possibly sent my sister to prison. Surely I should feel something. Remorse, regret, the desperate need to fix it. But the guilt never came. Instead, I felt a strange, crystalline clarity. I had not destroyed their lives. I had simply stopped preventing them from destroying themselves. There is a difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is hot and personal and often irrational. Justice is cold and precise and built on evidence. I had not acted out of hatred. I had acted out of self-preservation. That evening, my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Miss Henderson," a smooth male voice said. "My name is David Chen. I am an attorney representing your mother and sister. I would like to discuss a potential resolution to this unfortunate situation." "There is nothing to discuss," I said. "The evidence speaks for itself. Mrs. Henderson is willing to offer you a substantial sum if you recant your statement to the police. $25,000, cash, no questions asked." I almost laughed. They were trying to buy my silence with money they did not have, to cover up crimes that were already documented by multiple agencies. It was so perfectly Madeline, throwing money at a problem without understanding that some problems cannot be purchased. "Mr. Chen," I said calmly, "my mother attempted to sell my home without my knowledge or consent. My sister drove drunk, caused an accident, and fled the scene. They then conspired to commit insurance fraud by blaming me for the accident. These are not matters that can be resolved with cash payments. Tell my mother that if she contacts me again, I will file for a restraining order. Goodbye." I hung up and blocked the number. As darkness fell over Chicago, I stood at my window and watched the city lights flicker on. Somewhere out there, Madeline was scrambling to find $60,000 to pay back Vance. Somewhere out there, Cassie was probably being arraigned on felony charges. Somewhere out there, my former life was collapsing into rubble. And here I was, standing in my own apartment, drinking coffee I had paid for with money I had earned, surrounded by walls that belonged only to me. For 29 years, I had been taught my value came from my utility, that my purpose was to serve, that sacrifice without recognition was simply my role in the family dynamic. But tonight, I understood something fundamental. The worker who builds the factory also knows how to burn it down. The person who holds the family together has the power to let it fall apart. I was not a bad daughter. I was not cruel or heartless. I was simply done being the foundation upon which other people built their disasters. The workers' revolt was complete, and in the rubble of what had been, something new was beginning to grow, something that belonged entirely to me.